Madam Chair?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. To conduct this meeting virtually in accordance with Fairfax County Boards, Authorities, and Commissions remote participation policy, we need to take a roll call and verify that our remote participants' voices are clear and audible. To do so, I will conduct a roll call of those AHAC members on the virtual call. When your name is called, please state your name and your call-in location for remote participation. I know Marlene Blum.
Marlene Blum, Vienna, Virginia.
Marlene. I'll come back to Marlene. Eleanor Vincent.
I'm sorry, can you not hear me? Oh, That's weird.
I can hear Marlene.
There it is.
Me too. I heard her.
You heard me?
Eleanor?
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Oh, here we
Thank
go.
you.
Well, it might be a volume issue.
Okay.
Yes.
I can go ahead. while
Eleanor,
she's
can you
fixing
hear
that.
us?
Yeah. Yes, Eleanor Vincent calling from Montgomery Village in Maryland.
You saying about technology?
Yeah.
Not 90 seconds ago? We jinxed it.
Can you?
Eleanor's not, she's not muted.
Don't
It's not
see
muted. We can't hear her.
Yeah. Can't hear you.
Hang on, folks, if you can hear us. I can't see. So.
Wait.
Yeah, she's smiling.
Wait.
It sounds like she can hear us.
Yes.
She
See,
can.
Ava, you can hear us? Yep.
Yes.
But we
Marlene's there.
Our volume is turned off.
There we go, chat. Perfect. And Linda, thank you. Will we see you? Hey, Joe.
Hi, sorry.
Yeah, it's the maze. Did you bring your library card to?
Yes.
They just said that they can hear Marlene and Ava too, so it's a speaker.
Everyone can hear. We
Okay.
just,
Hey, Cookie.
Hello.
Cookie?
Do I have a name for your channel?
is it the gizmo on the wall?
I'm a little disorganized this Friday.
Oh, Leah has it.
You know who
Are
she is.
we able to do just announcements before we get into business? Or since those aren't as part of the agenda, or do we need to do this first?
I think we do need to do
Okay.
this first,
Yeah.
would be
Don't
my
wanna
advice.
Yeah. So we did it.
The Supreme Court says.
Yeah, exactly. I apologize, guys. I forgot my glasses, and so just for now, I'm going to wear my prescription sunglasses at night.
So
I love it.
So when I was,
I know, me too. You will see me in the grocery store wearing my sunglasses because otherwise God knows what I'll buy.
In the car.
I was 13 years old, I was working with my father on a ladder, and he took off his sunglasses to see something. I knocked them off, broke them. Excuse me, took off his regular glasses. I knocked them off and broke them. The next day, he had to appear before Congress. He had to wear his sunglasses to appear before Congress, and he did look like a mafia gangster or something. He never forgave me.
Oh, my God.
You never forget.
Oh, God, no.
No.
One of the real traumatic experiences.
Yes,
of my childhood.
trauma. Yeah, before Congress.
So are we, do we think we got it?
Okay. So I'm going to pick it up from the resolution where we need folks who are appearing virtually to state your name and the location you're calling from. And I'll start with Marlene Blum.
Marlene Blum, Vienna.
Eleanor Vincent.
Eleanor Vincent, Montgomery Village, Maryland.
Ava Nguyen. Ava, can you hear us?
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Ava Nguyen from McLean, Virginia.
And are there any other members of AHAC on the call? If so, state your name and location. And I'd like to acknowledge that Linda Hoffman is joining us virtually, and she'll be part of the report out later. Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. Go Tigers. And I think we are ready to go. I need now.
There's a motion, isn't there?
I move.
Yeah, why don't I do that? I move that the voices of all AHEC members participating remotely are clear, audible, and can be adequately heard in accordance with the PAC policy for remote meeting participation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Great. So we are officially getting started at 9:36. Just a couple of things, some membership news. We are really pleased that Evelyn Spain is going to join us from the Planning Commission. I think some of you know we welcomed Abrar last meeting, but she has decided not to run for reelection. And so I think, no, that's school board. Planning Commission. Abrar is not going to run. Her appointment should still be good through the end of this year. And so that's great, but we'll begin working to make sure that, you know, the school board, that we welcome someone, but Evelyn will be joining us, which is terrific. And then there are still some other members that we're working on, either appointments from supervisors, or we have a couple of open appointments that the director would put in place. And we've had some inquiries from folks who are interested. So we'll keep you posted on that. And Tom or Regina, I know that there's a scholarship opportunity. Did you want to talk about that? I don't know if it's in our packet. It's always exciting.
So, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. In furtherance of our efforts under the Housing Authority's Moving to Work designation, we are utilizing a small portion of our federal funds, $50,000 a year, to provide scholarships for college and trade students, trade school students who are coming out of housing programs that are operated by the FCRHA. We're very excited about this. This is something that moving to work housing authorities and non-moving to work housing authorities across the country have done, and we think that this is a really important step forward from the standpoint of our broader anti-poverty mission. So we're accepting applications, I think, through mid-May, I believe it is. And we've already received, I think, many applications. I don't have a number just yet, but it is advertised on the Housing Authority's website, and just want to make sure that you all know about that. We'll keep you posted on it.
Well done.
Can
And
I
so
just ask a question? Look, I just think this is fabulous. I was so excited when I saw this. I'm like, yeah. Do you have any idea how many students would qualify? I mean, I have no idea of the scale. And you said it's what, $2,000 a year?
So it's $5,000 a year for 10 students.
Oh, that's nice.
for
Do you
the
have any idea?
entire time that they are in? Or
No,
just the first year?
that's per year.
That's great. But you anticipate, says you've already gotten more application.
We have.
You got.
Yeah.
Is there any consideration given to leveraging this money from small businesses or people that want to support the local community?
I think ultimately, really this is sort of a pilot of this thing. And the idea is that once we kind of get this sort of normalized, that we'd like to hand it off, for operational purposes to a partner like, take your pick.
Let's say a nonprofit.
A nonprofit partner of some variety who we're hoping would help us leverage additional resources as well.
That's just great. I think it's a wonderful plan.
And to that point, are there examples from other moving to work authorities of having the same kind of model?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Worked well.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we've been working on this for probably the last year and a half. Because we wanted to get it right. So we've done a lot of benchmarking of the other MTW agencies. We've done a lot of benchmarking work, more broadly. So, but yeah, we felt like this was, kind of a good first step with something like this that, we're hoping to, as I said, be able to turn it over to a partner to operate, once we kind of get it up and really running. Linda Hoffman has been working on the scholarship program in great depth. Linda, do you care to comment anymore if I have missed anything?
No, I can't think of anything really to add to it, but appreciate if you have other groups to share the information with, please feel free, and happy to answer any questions offline if you have, a client or a friend, whoever, just please let us know. Happy to help in any way we can.
That's great.
Thanks for that, Linda. And I would just note for everybody that among Linda's many tasks, this is something on which she's been a real leader, and we've really appreciated her work with that.
Nick?
Eligible residents are people who live at FCRHA properties or properties with FCRHA who may have a ground lease interest, but not the ownership of the property, or just provided funding, or
It's more directly our operational piece. Linda, do you want to put a finer point on that?
somebody you could take a shot.
Sure. Yes, it's for FCRHA owned or managed properties, as well as anyone in our any of the rental assistance programs. But we're excluding at least this initial year again till we kind of get this a little bit more, going. It right now does not include anybody who would be supported in a property that just had financing, for example. So it's really centered on our residents who have some type of support through the RHA right now.
That's great. Yeah. I'm going to I see that Ken McMillan has joined us, and Ken, for our virtual meeting policy, could you please state your name and the location from which you are calling? Give you a minute there you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I was a little late, but it's Ken McMillan, and I'm communicating with you all from West Falls Church, Virginia.
Wonderful. Welcome. I'm going to go back to Jerry. We're talking about a scholarship program.
So I'm thinking two ways. How do we sustain this program? I think there's already some ideas about how to grow more capital into it. The second one is, from the Human Services Council, we think a lot about innovative programs that could make a difference in people's lives. And we're about ready to launch using American Rescue Plan Act funds, a guaranteed income strategy that I think is really important. But how would we measure effectiveness of this and then begin to open conversations about how we could grow capacity to do more, because clearly that's an important.
Sure, maybe I'll start and Linda can jump in here a little bit as well. But the primary objective is the avoidance of generational poverty, and the clearest path to that is through education, of course. And so, we're very lucky in this jurisdiction anyway, because although a family may live in supported housing, the kids can go to Fairfax County Public Schools and have all of the benefits of that and all of the opportunity that exists here from an economic standpoint. So we don't face, the challenges that other jurisdictions face in many ways. And we view this as being another aspect of that. Linda, do you want to add to that?
That's great. I mean, as Tom said it perfectly, that's really the purpose behind it. I think as far as sustaining the program, growing it, obviously, as Tom had mentioned, we'd love to be able to take this year and understand lessons learned from an operations standpoint, and also just trying to get the word out to our residents. And so, being able to kind of leverage connections, for example, with the Human Services Council would be great, just so more of our folks kind of understand the opportunity out there. And hopefully we'll get, and we have gotten some great applications so far. And, being able, just because we're starting small, being able to really understand from the awardee's perspective what was helpful and what we could change to be able to build that into the process moving forward, I think will be another touch point to kind of understand and grow and improve.
That's great. I think if I may just offer, and I'm sure that some of the other nonprofit organizations who do work with the Rotaries and have our own scholarship programs, some of what we have learned over time is that it's not the first year scholarship, it's the latter years. And we were able to convince the Herndon Reston Rotary, as an example, to also go back when we have adult learners who are more ready to come back and make them eligible for scholarships, and not just the first, career or college bound student. So there is a lot of learning about what's happened. And we do have information about, unfortunately, how many kids do, and from a generational poverty, do get to school the first, second year, but without the supports in school or when their families call and need help, what happens. So I think you certainly, and Linda, I'd invite you to, a lot of us in the Opportunity Neighborhood, the community connected sites contract that work in tandem with the housing properties, probably have some information that we could share as you guys continue to grow the program, and just we might tailor this, but just offering that from our experience.
Tom or Linda, you get 100 applications, you got 20 spots. What are the criteria? How do you decide, and who's deciding?
To let Linda describe that in much further detail than I'd be able to.
We have some basic, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. So this is just off the top of my head. We have some eligibility criteria that everyone would have to meet. They have to be a resident at or assisted through the RHA for at least 6 months, a resident of Fairfax County. And I'm missing one. There are 3. But after basically we're screening the applications for those 3 eligibility, then they'll go, assuming their application is complete, it'll all get pulled together and scored. We have a scoring matrix looking at things like grade point average. We have some essays for folks, 2 essays that they have to respond, participation in any kind of leadership program or, after school programs, GPA. And then we're also having, for folks that are at a lower income level, there will be some bonus points added to the application as well, so that we're able to somewhat add that in as well. But it's mostly based off of merit. So kind of a combination. And then as far as who, we're pulling together a small evaluation committee comprised of 2 FCRHA commissioners and then an appointee from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And we plan on hopefully announcing our awardees at the beginning of July in anticipation for this next academic year coming up. And it is open. Carrie, I know you had mentioned for older adults, we did not stipulate that it is just for graduating high school seniors. So there's no age stipulation. We really hope that older, that not kids coming out of high school. We want it to be a broader application pool than just that population.
I'd really invite you. There are some phenomenal youth leaders in this county who work with youth and who assess these things. And it would be neat if you wanted to get community input into that, as well as people from the community themselves, parents or teachers. You might consider adding them to your evaluation just as a suggestion. But this is really exciting. And I think what's great is that we're celebrating something, recognizing with things like the Guaranteed Income Pilot, that we are moving with our community and understanding a little bit more in terms of our goals for One Fairfax. So great.
Let me just add my final point, which is communications. These young people are going to be very charismatic young leaders. A video of them accepting the award and making a statement would be a terrific marketing tool, because in many ways, the novelty of the program has great potential for influencing younger people to imagine themselves on a pathway towards success like that. And that's really the greater benefit that we want to accrue.
Wonderful final point. Right, I think we're ready to move on.
Budget.
Shall I turn it over to you, Joe?
Sure. Thank you, Mary, and everybody else who provided testimony to the board. I think that one of the very clear themes of the budget hearings this year was support for affordable housing, coming from a lot of different perspectives. I think there was a lot of consistency. It was also kind of neat to hear, folks from very different advocacy perspectives talking about the importance, and hopefully, that is a theme that will continue. Where we are right now in the process is sort of the discussion has gone now behind closed doors. The chairman, who's also the chairman of the budget committee, will start meeting next week individually with each of his colleagues to talk about what they heard, to talk about what what they've got to make changes to with. If you haven't seen it, the county executive releases the advertised budget in February, and then in early April, he releases what's called the add-on memo, which is a list of all the changes that he's identified from the time the budget came out until that point. Oftentimes, there may be some additional state money that has come about as a result of the state budget. There may be some additional expenditures that need to be identified. There may be the impact of the poll, which doesn't get filed until March, so isn't available when the advertisement is put together. This year, there were a number of things. The bottom line is the $90 million that was available as a result of the advertised budget becomes $110 million because, again, of some of those adjustments in add-on. And so that's kind of the basis for the discussion that the board will have over the course of, they've already been having certainly, but they'll continue to have over the course of the next week. And then next Friday afternoon, so a week from today, they'll come back out into sort of the public at a budget committee meeting, what they call pre-markup, and lay out what that package that they've worked on in those individual conversations looks like, and what adjustments they're going to make to the variety of things that they're going to make adjustments to, the tax rate, pay, hopefully housing, you know, all the rest of them. The other part of the conversation that will occur is because they act simultaneously on the FY24 budget and third quarter, which the board received in March. As you'll recall, in the third quarter recommendation, there was $10 million in non-recurring funds that the county executive included for affordable housing, pulling from a reserve that had been set up 3 years ago for the pandemic and not needed because of all the federal money that flowed. There is a small balance in third quarter as well. Some might not say small, $10 million balance in third quarter as well. And so that will be part of the conversation also in terms of what the uses for that could be. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that maybe there's a little bit more from that one-time source added to the one-time that the county executive recommended additionally for affordable housing. And then finally, they'll talk about the budget guidance. And as I think we talked about certainly in the executive committee, but I think at the last full meeting, Supervisor Palchik is advocating for the budget guidance that we've kind of drafted and come to agreement on, recognizing that there'll be some tweaks depending on what steps they take in terms of the funding, because there were some references in there for that. And so there'll be hopefully some action on a couple of different fronts. I do think that, you know, one of the points that we make in the budget guidance, which is as the federal funding that we've been so fortunate to have and so able to use for affordable housing is used up, the pressure on baseline funding becomes even more significant. And so really the focus, as we don't have the ability at quarterly reviews and as part of adjustments to that federal funding to push large tranches of funding to affordable housing, and that will be starting in FY25, you know, we'll need to have a real movement on the baseline funding.
Any other questions? Did we decide?
It's not.
That pre-mark, they really don't want to mess around with it after that. They come out next Friday.
Yeah. So the
This is the important time.
yes. So Friday, when they finish, in theory, I'll come back to what in theory means, but in theory, they'll have reached agreement about the basic framework. There will continue to be tweaking on the margins. Certainly the language and budget guidance will continue to maybe move a little bit. But the goal is that by the end of that meeting, there'll be consensus and hopefully the vast majority of the board agreeing on what has been said. There historically, and I don't know if it'll be the case this year, have been competing budget proposals going on as well. Sometimes those see the light of day before markup, pre-markup. Sometimes they occur at pre-markup. Sometimes they occur next the Tuesday after that. I guess that's May 2nd. is when the board actually takes action, because the pre-markup discussion is a committee meeting. They don't take action on anything. They just talk about it and kind of, agree or not. On Tuesday, the 2nd, is when they'll vote, and sometimes that alternative budget proposal comes up there. If it comes up there, it's going to be completely flat because there won't be any, traction for it. But so yes, but there's always a chance for a little bit of movement.
Where does that come from?
Okay.
Where does that alternative come from?
A member or members who don't agree with what the consensus is.
Election year. Nice to put something different. Did the Richmond make a decision on the Fairfax County Public Schools? Did Richmond make a decision on the schools funding? That it resolved?
Decision on the shortfall?
Yeah.
Yeah, we plugged that hole.
They did, okay. I missed that.
Thanks, Fred.
We plugged the hole that somehow.
Just appeared.
So is there continued advocacy going on kind of behind the scenes?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's like, what can, are there things that we should be doing?
Yeah, I think that,
Just one footnote, John, to your question. We plugged the hole of the missing money. But there remains uncertainty out there in school systems, I think it's fair to say, as to exactly what additional, if any additional monies, if so, how much additional monies will be coming. And that's all tied up in the ongoing budget negotiations. And that's not going to get resolved by next Tuesday. Not a chance.
So things still happening, still opportunities to speak with the supervisors and staff.
Yeah, I mean, I can say from my job, certainly Supervisor Patrick is getting calls, emails and texts and on a wide variety of topics. So yes, any relationships that folks have, I think continuing to hammer home the message is beneficial.
Yep. Okay, great.
Joe, I'm just going to pick at a scab all the time though. The 25 budget, with trying to figure out what that is and how bad it's going to be. I would really appreciate if your committee can begin to look at those alternative fundings, right?
Yes.
So we talked about Amazon, all the other defense contractors. If we start plugging into those now, setting the pace, I think we can at least be not in a tranche when we hit for that 25 and might make it up and then get healthier in 26, 27.
Yeah, I would say the affordable housing really dominated the testifying on Wednesday. Have you heard any reaction back from any of the board members or through anybody about any of the board members, how they?
And I know Supervisor Patrick was very.
How did that move people?
I mean, she's committed, so there wasn't necessarily movement, but it was definitely validation. And again, I think what was maybe a little bit different and striking was that the advocacy came from lots of different places, not necessarily just the same people who would expect it from, right? I mean, there was advocacy on the environmental front for affordable housing, for example. And I think that was it was a very rich conversation.
And I thought, just for myself, I'm always honored to testify, but really you're sick of looking at me. And I really don't come from a place of, I guess, lived experience or whatever those words were. But I think we saw people who have ownership and personal investment coming out, and there was a mix up with our group that, they upped our time, and I live 10 minutes and I can just get here. I can drop what I'm doing, but not everybody can. And appreciated the Board of Supervisors, Chairman McKay, sort of shifting things, right? And that was very powerful visually and what they had to say.
Talking about the mobile homeowners.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
I'm sorry, 80 people.
It's phenomenal.
Residents from FCRHA communities, opportunity neighborhood leaders, I know from Facets, Cornerstones, throughout sprinkling their opinion, which is why, and I know we're going to Tom, I was curious as to why Chairman McKay didn't reference housing in his budget recap. So that was a little disappointing.
Or
It wasn't
puzzling.
Puzzling, given it wasn't just the 12th looking at there were other times, but anyways, just a comment.
And now for something completely different. Just all I had wanted to say was that, I cannot tell you how grateful we all are for the advocacy work that has been done. This is, to borrow Joe's term, this is the most robust advocacy and outreach I think I've seen in my career here with Fairfax County. And I just, on behalf of the staff who gets to implement these things, we're just very grateful for all of the work that you all have done. It's been just phenomenal.
I think that was really the question of efficacy. And there was that, I think this year, I did not send out the summary from that to the full AHAC, but wanted to do that and today to make sure if there was, what is the action item, what is the push. And Mary and I have a lot of pictures, and just Tom, to let you know that our communications person is going through all the video and is pulling clips of what we just talked about in terms of the wide variety of people who were speaking to housing. I was talking to Sonia, everybody, whether it's the environmental end or the folks from CAP. So she's going to put something together, again, focusing on that we'll be able to, use as maybe a rah-rah, whatever purpose it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for Jeff McKay, but I wouldn't read too much into
I know.
What he did or didn't say. As Joe points out, what's happening now is all behind the scenes anyway, and that's the important stuff. And I don't think we're going to lose Jeff McKay.
Takeaway for me was what I've intuitively thought is that we have to get the voices of people who live this in front. And that was a challenge with one or two people that wouldn't testify, that would have had something really meaningful to say. And that's I think that's sort of a behind the scenes thing, but trying to help ourselves understand what will empower them, encourage them to come forward, because I think the board always sits up a little straighter, if you will, when they're listening to people who really every morning get up with whatever that challenge is. Today's the right do, I got to decide between this and that, or I've got, heaven forbid, rats running around my home or whatever it is. So I'm trying to think about strategically how we can make that happen. And also someone mentioned environment, the climate thing, to build coalitions with other groups to do that and figure out who the people are. I know one person is really involved in the county with climate environment, maybe between now and whenever, to reach out to her and say, how can we build this testimony together?
And we see your hand up. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I want to harken on what the young lady just said. One of the things I noticed, and I was unable to.
Glasses either.
I'm sorry?
I'm laughing, Ken. You called me a young lady.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to disparage you. But,
she was pleased.
But one of the things that I thought about, I was unable to speak before the budget hearings myself. But when we start talking about advocacy and people who have a lived experience such as myself, it's very difficult, even now that COVID is gone, for some of us to get there, to be able to testify in public, and as well as to be able to put together something that you could write in a letter. I have a background with writing letters and stuff like that, but a lot of the population that we're trying to help and lift up do not have access to that. We're not talking about just language barriers, but also in their own respective language. They may have a disability as far as speaking things. So I was often wondered that why don't we go out into the fields, so to speak, to use a poor term, and teach people how to advocate for themselves, teach them how to be vocal. A lot of people working don't have the proper education to be able to speak forward. And even though they may be able to say what's going on in their lives and how they feel and so forth and so on, they may feel intimidated by going up against people who are obviously more educated and so forth and so on. And especially for those who are immigrants, low income housing, things of that nature. We would serve our county better to get more of them in front of the line by giving them a boot up and assisting them and teaching them how to speak. I know the Literary Council does a very good job in getting people who English is a second language and so forth and so on. And they cover a wide variety of different languages in and of itself. But we're still not getting to the heart of the moment. And no matter how much we try to advocate for those who do not have a voice, we still would do better if we can get them to put the fire or put the flame to the fire as to why this is so important. And that's just my 3 cents and a quarter.
And thank you so much. And I think probably the most positive thing the only positive thing that has come out of COVID has been the ability to present virtual testimony or to telephone. And so your comment as a strategy for our ground game to continue to encourage people to be able to participate where they are, particularly the videos are so easily done on a cell phone and then submitted, and also help with the translation. So thank you for that. We'll put it as a real action item, if I may, and for our communications committee, but also budget.
The only thing I want to add to that, I've been a student of the advocacy for affordable homes for all for quite a few years. And I've watched its evolution. I think that's where Tom's statement about never been as big as it has been this year. I think that's the movement we're trying to create, which is to liberate it from a fewer older hands who are putting groups together to do this, into seeing people becoming as self-empowered over this. When the Tenant and Workers United group came to the table, it was a masterful self-statement of we speak truth to power. And the numbers of people who were witnesses to that, I think, builds a backbench, as Ken would argue we need to do. It's our job to really be coordinating with others who we were surprised at their testimony, to be in greater community with them about next year being bigger than this year.
100%. And I see Dr. Vincent, I see that you have your hand up.
Yes, I was nodding while Ken was talking because we've talked about creating local advocacy groups or made up of individuals with lived experience who are the subject matter experts. We are not. We work in the field. I mean, we do all what we're doing. But one of the things that we've seen that can be extremely powerful is having people go and stand in front of, I think somebody said it makes the legislators sit up straighter, because they really do. But it does require some intentional, focused preparation, to your points, Ken. I know, for example, we've had a Consumer Advisory Council for 20 odd years. But in order to get them where they can now they're going down to Richmond on their own. They're doing all these things. I think it must have taken us a year, just in terms of just really working with folks as a group, individually, teaching them to tell their stories. People have stories to tell, but not everybody knows how to tell the story so it has impact. And so it's really helping people to learn how to tell that story in words, in pictures, verbally. In psychology, we say you have to say the same thing 7 times before somebody gets it, right? And because we all learn different ways, we really, Carrie, you talk about putting that as an action item. And I'm just saying that we should, if we could add some specific strategies that we know have worked. So for example, developing marketing tools. It is a marketing pitch, right? So developing marketing tools, everything from flyers to, is the board open to looking at a video presentation at these hearings? And I don't mean just people on their cell phones doing these things, but things that we can you can pull it together and it's a whole, you know what I mean? But it can be a very powerful tool. And I think it's one that is kind of under-tapped right now, but can be so extremely effective. And I'll go out on a limb and say if we want to really follow that path and push for it, I'll be very happy to support that project and that that effort.
Wonderful. And you can count that we'll be coming back.
Yes.
And
I'm sure I said
Hearing
that and I
share
said
the-
that and I was like,
We heard it.
I'll teach you to
Said that.
volunteer.
100%.
Yeah.
And I wanted to thank Regina for including, and really just a shout out to Mary for sharing with me the testimony. We have others that I didn't include, but you can see some of those stories come to life and the number of people that came out, and it was amazing. And of course, Dr. Poggi. One last thing. So for the, I would like to summarize in all email your comments, Joe, out to the full AHAC, letting them know in their conversations. And with due respect, Delegate Sullivan, of course, Jeff McKay supports affordable housing, but it's sometimes the omission of just mentioning it when that means something. And so it's the same thing. Sometimes it's hard, but just including it is because he's going to have to respond to different pressures. And that's all I mean by that. I'm not, but it's something that I will have said to him already, that, every opportunity, because he does that everywhere. It's his stump speech. So it just felt like a little bit of an omission. Jill?
Yeah, no, I just want to echo your comments, Carrie, because I noticed it as well. And I was like, really? All of Wednesday was almost about affordable housing, and it was an omission. So I don't know if it was an intentional omission, but it's, just kind of speaks to everything we're saying here, that we've got to keep up the pressure. We have to include people with lived experience. Eleanor, I think Pathways has done an incredible job in your Consumer Advisory Council. I've been in Richmond several times now with that council. It is meaningful, and I think that's what's impactful. But yes, echo all of it.
So great, and really great job, Joe. Profoundly grateful to you to have the reality and then the guidance to enable all of us to push further to what we know the ultimate goal. But it has been just great, and I wonder where Supervisor Palchik heard that she might include some of this in the budget guidance. So I'm very grateful. So thank you.
Yes.
Shall we move on to the update? Linda?
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you guys today. It's great to see everybody. I'm Linda Hoffman. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Associate Director of Policy here at the Department of Housing and Community Development. And so again, thank you. And a special thank you to Malia and Regina for all of your help and support. So I wanted to just quickly go through just a high level update of outcomes from this past General Assembly. Wanted to kind of set the stage too before I dive into any of the actual legislation that has just passed, and just to provide some context at the beginning of kind of how the process works from our agency's perspective too. And then kind of launch into a few of the new legislation, again, that is will be effective come July 1. Just to quickly state too, this is kind of our first go at everything. This is kind of my first initial preliminary review. We're still getting information, and really we'll be summarizing a much broader package of information about outcomes from this General Assembly. So this is kind of our first take at it again, and then we'll start preparing for 24. Next slide, please. So as I know all of you know, the GA meets every year starting in January. On odd number years, which is what we're at this year, the General Assembly meets for 30 days, our short session, and then on even number years, it meets for 60 days. So during the General Assembly, our agency, HCD, is asked to review bills by both chambers. We're assigned these bills. They're all obviously related to housing, particularly affordable housing, but we do get a broad range of bills relating to all aspects of housing. Like our sister agencies, these bills are kind of assigned to us from our government relations office. For those of you familiar, that's Claudia Arco's division. And our agency, along with others, are asked to kind of weigh in on the bills. They kind of use us as subject matter experts, if you will, kind of trying to understand any changes that the bill has, and then to kind of weigh in as to whether we think it would be helpful or we would adopt kind of a neutral policy, or the bill would have any kind of adverse impact. So again, these bills come to us. They're also simultaneously going to other agencies. We kind of review that, provide our 2 cents, if you will, and then Government Relations Office kind of pulls all that information together to come up with a position on a particular bill. And then they work really closely with our Board of Supervisors, particularly Supervisor Walkinshaw's office as chair of the Legislative Committee. Again, really trying to pull in many, many different voices and perspectives to inform the bill as they move forward, and allow the board that information to be able to see if they wanted to develop a specific position on a bill. Next slide, please. So at the end of the session, which is really where we're at right now, we receive a list of all the legislation kind of that was dropped during the session. We'll see what's passed, what didn't pass. And then obviously for those bills that did pass, as an agency, we'll have to make sure that we do a deep dive and understand and implement those laws. Again, most of them go into effect at the beginning of the state and county's fiscal year, July 1. And then we also have a responsibility to go through all the new legislation and inform the board if any of these new laws will impart new local authority. Next slide, please. So for this year, our agency reviewed 58 unique bills. In general, this is a little bit lower than in previous years. Again, it was a short session, so it's a little bit intensive. Also because we have a divided government between, divided parties between House and Senate. We typically don't see quite as many bills coming out in those years. And again, most of what I'll walk through next will become effective on July 1st. So next slide, please. So again, just wanted to highlight some of the key bills that passed. This text on the following slides are really pulled from the Virginia Legislative Information System. So I don't have specific knowledge on each bill, but I'm happy offline if you wanted to take a deeper dive or have questions. I can pull up the legislation. Most of it's available publicly, but I can happy to help in any way if there's specific questions on what I'm about to review. But the first group I wanted to talk through were some bills that were passed related to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. So they're all kind of new things that will go into effect related to landlord and tenant issues. The first one, SB 891, basically gives landlords a little bit more time to develop an itemized list of damages and costs when this exceeds a renter's security deposit. So it's new legislation that will kind of somewhat help landlords in that area. The next one on your slide there, HB 1635. This allows a renter to end a lease and receive a full refund if when they first enter or first initially move in, there's a condition that's basically life-threatening. So this is, again, a little bit a new change to the law that will provide more protections for tenants. Next slide, please. Next one at the top of your slide there, HB 1702, requires a landlord to inform a tenant. Again, these would be tenants that have any kind of lease where they're automatically renewed. So this is making sure that now if a tenant is on that type of lease, that they're given at least 60 days notice if their rent's going to increase kind of at the next renewal of their lease. So helpful for tenants. And then the last one there on that slide, HB 1735, this is a little bit more administrative in nature, but could be positive for landlords. And that it's if a tenant does not sign a statement acknowledging that they received their statement of tenant rights, a landlord basically can just document that instead of it holding up the signing up, the leasing up process. Next slide, please. 7. This one, I apologize. I know that slide is really dense. HB 2441 basically is noting that landlords, this is, I think, intended for landlords with multiple units, so not your mom and pops, but landlords that have multiple month-to-month leases, that again, they're giving renters 60-day notice if their tenancy is about to expire with their month-to-month rental agreement. So protections, additional protections for tenants. Next slide, please. This new piece of legislation, kind of switching gears, is more on fair housing.
All of us.
HB 1725. This basically prohibits an individual from falsifying any kind of information when they're making a reasonable accommodation request for assistance animals. Next slide, please.
My nephew has an emotional.
These two are really related more to the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. So they're really impacting more the state than Fairfax County per se, but we will have a secondary impact for us as a county. So the first one on your slide there, HB 2494, requires localities to report to the state a summary of any new policies, ordinances, or processes affecting the development and construction of housing. So again, because it hasn't been implemented yet, we're not sure what this will mean. We're keeping a close eye on it, but we would expect additional reporting requirements to fulfill this coming down from the state. And the second one, there's SB 839, which is authorizing, again, the State Department of Housing and Community Development to conduct a needs assessment every 5 years and to develop a statewide housing plan and update this plan every 5 years. So important to note, too, that both of these, is our understanding, applies to all housing, so not exclusive to affordable housing. So we'll probably be working in conjunction with our sister agencies in Department of Planning and Development and Zoning, et cetera. Ken, did you have a question, or do you want me to wait till the end? Happy to, either way. Oops, you're on mute.
I can wait to the end. This has to do with the landlord and tenant handbook that the county has. I guess I can ask it now. So the new things that you're putting in there, will that be updated immediately to the landlord and tenant handbook? Because I've been giving some instructions to people who are asking for help about the landlord and tenant book. And if those things that you're now saying are not included in there, we put those people who are renters at a disadvantage on knowing some of the new rules that have come to pass, to fruition. So that's my question.
Sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Linda. I was just going to note for everybody that tenant landlord is handled by Consumer Affairs. So not HCD, but our understanding would definitely be that if the law is enacted and effective as of July 1, that the handbook would be updated to reflect it.
Thanks, Tom.
Great. Next slide, please, unless there's any other questions. This is related more to community development and preservation, HB 1805. And it's basically adding affordable housing to the list of what the Virginia Resources Authority may finance. So we're viewing this as a potential, new source of affordable housing financing going forward.
That's great.
Next slide, please.
Linda?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Who's the Virginia Resource Authority and how much money do they have?
Uh,
Yeah,
really.
asking for a friend.
Love it.
Resource Authority, go ahead, Linda.
Oh,
What's
no,
your
I was
phone
gonna say,
number?
I don't know off the top of my head, so we could find out unless anyone else has information. I could research that and get back to you.
They are, as their name implies, a freestanding authority. They issue bonds and do things in a bunch of different areas. They've got a great website if you want to take it. This actually is a great bill that was Rob Bloxham who represents the Northern Neck. This bill, and most of these bills, just for what it's worth, I think it's fair to say all of these bills that Linda's walking through passed either
Yes.
unanimously or darn close. There weren't many bills at all this year that passed on really tight margins in any subject, and certainly not in housing, which I think is a good thing. But they get their money a variety of different ways. We can appropriate it. I think they have ability to apply some fees to things. But I agree with Linda. This is the reason Rob did this, is to try to find a new funding source for affordable housing stuff.
Take advantage of you while you're here with the SB 839, the one before about every 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years, for the 4-year for an administration, it's interesting. You could actually skip and not impact the budget based on how we do budgets. Where that year fits and how it continues is kind of important. And I think it doesn't allow all those changes that we need to affect through the resourcing, et cetera.
Yeah, that was a Lee Ware bill who great guy, Republican. I don't know how he picked 5 years. For all I know, I could check it for you. It might have been introduced at less. In fact, now I'm interested. It might have been introduced at less than that. But yeah, I mean, 5 years is an eternity in Virginia.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, it's at least 5 years.
Yeah. I'm going to find out.
Virginia Resource Authority has funded more than 2,600 critical projects in the Commonwealth, exceeding 11 billion for Virginia communities. So housing isn't yet on their inventory of what they pursue, but presumably by July 1st, it might be. And agencies with new responsibilities may take a long job zoning to get them to fully embrace the new mission.
Let your friend know, yeah. Linda.
Great. Well, thank you for answering the question. So the next one is SB 1320. Again, really less about Fairfax County, but very important too, as it relates more to the state. But it's establishing a new community development financial institutions program. My understanding is that this codifies a fund that was created in 2021 and then establishes this program again, which could be used for preservation and rehabilitation, community revitalization efforts. And then the next slide 12, please. Thank you. So the livable home tax credit, again, like the other ones, more applicable on state changes, but definitely will have an impact, increasing the amount of the tax credit. From 500,000, from my understanding, up to 1 million, or I'm sorry, from 1 million to 2 million for development or retrofitting of units for accessibility. And it also increases tax credits an individual can claim from 5,000 to 6,500, again, for any kind of retrofitting around accessibility issues. So we view this as, positive and hoping to further encourage more units that would be accessible. So next slide, please. That's kind of the last bill that, again, as was mentioned, that were enacted, it passed. Those all will go into effect July. But this last page that you're seeing here really is where we pull most of our information from the Virginia Legislative Information System. So I'm happy again offline just to help if you have any further questions about any of the bills. Also, our legislative program for the county can be found at that website as well too, which has a host of information. They always kind of summarize all the board meetings, and that's also where you'll find the positions that the county is taking for next year and for future years, or as they're developed. So with that, I'll conclude. But thank you all. Happy to answer any questions if I can.
So this is not a partisan comment. This is an observation. Because those were bipartisan bills. There were several Republicans that put in those bills, but you recall pre-session, there was a little boom of excitement about something the governor said having to do with affordable housing. I don't recall seeing anything from the governor
All going to come out
in this space.
Enhancements.
Keep thinking, Jerry. Anyway, like I said, that was, I suppose, from my way of thinking, a little disappointing, but it was a weird session. It's an election year. It was a short session. That's why the numbers were down. Like Jeff McKay, that may mean nothing. But,
I didn't mean disrespectfully.
no, of course not.
Good point.
Of course not. But we'll see what happens next year. There's always another session coming.
Jill and Jerry, we're going to leave it to you to lead into the next anyways.
Oh, I just had a question, just out of curiosity with HCD, if you're asked to weigh in on kind of more of like the land use legislative proposals as well, or does that just go to planning and zoning? How does that work? Like which bills is HCD asked to weigh in on? Anything dealing with housing?
Yeah, we get a wide variety, to be honest. Some land use, typically not the pure zoning ones. It's a bit of sausage making. We kind of get a lot of different things. We had a lot we reviewed this year that they sent to all county agencies on the regulation of cannabis or medical cannabis, right? So there's a lot that comes at us. Some are a little bit more specific to HCD, but it's at the end, and again, where we're kind of at right now is where we'll get all the information.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So Linda, I just wanted to thank you. This is a terrific aid to all of us on AHAC to be seeing everything in synopsis. I'd also urge people to read the March 7th updated report from Claudia and her team that kind of gives the big narrative across all the bills, but it also gives context to how housing bills might fit into the very large envelope of bills for the year. I wanted to just ask you and Tom, most of this is a reactive mode to what has been thrown into the hopper. Do we have in HCD a developing wish list coming into every legislative session that this would make life far better for us striving to build and preserve? And, that's really the meatus of where we would hope to get to with the legislative committee's contribution. So we might have some help here in this group on particular bills that maybe it's hard for you and you have 12 staff people working with you on policy. I didn't catch the number of staff people helping you on this task.
So I want to answer that on behalf of our team of 13, actually. One of the big challenges that we have with respect to housing development is our local housing authorities' access to bond volume cap throughout the year. That's
the friend I was asking about.
There is a policy level prohibition on the local housing authorities applying for more than $20 million in bond volume cap per project prior to July 1 in any given year. You may recall that I believe the Affordable Housing Preservation Task Force made a recommendation in this respect. We were hoping to be able to resolve this at a policy level. There has since been turnover at DHCD in Richmond as in terms of the leadership and of course the new administration. But that is all to say that we would certainly like to see, I would like to see some directive from the legislature that removes that cap for the local housing authorities. So,
Single most helpful thing you could do for affordable housing development up here.
yep.
Period.
Well, I know a guy.
You can speak for a guy.
If you could let him know.
Look, that's a great idea. That I've made this point to Jerry, you know, what the most encouraging thing about what the executive committee is doing, what Jerry and your group is doing is changing the schedule. Because, well, I got a little election to go through, you know, I'm hoping to go back next year. And I got a little file folder that's already marked bills for 2025. That's next year, 2024. Because we got to get that stuff started, drafted, vetted, start to get people jazzed about it and planning for it. If you're introducing a bill that no one's heard anything about on day one, yeah, it's a much steeper climb. So that's a great idea, and I'd love to work with you.
We would be very grateful. And in terms of time frame, you know, with the county process, the agencies have, generally speaking, until July 1 to turn in their legislative proposals. The BACs, as I recall, have until August 1, so it's a little squishy in terms of by when we could get this done. But honestly, this would not be that difficult to write. It would essentially be, you know, just something in the Housing Authorities Act or something like that.
Well, I call Claudia every year and say, okay, what's Fairfax got that they want me to carry?
Yeah,
this one sounds good.
This would be a very high priority for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rip, I think that's where kind of we're thinking about the legislative committee, bringing back to the executive committee work that would allow us to flesh out details like that, but also then say, how do we use the power of the group to advocate for what we would all hope could become cemented in the budget priorities for next year's legislative session, and become articulate as the group in why that is so important. Because to be frank, Nick, that's not on the common citizen's mind.
Yeah, I don't understand why not.
This is not a bumper sticker bill.
There's two pieces to it. When tax exempt bonds kind of come into the state and they get distributed to a bunch of different buckets, right? The housing of the local issuer pool has a certain amount of money. The majority of the money goes to the HDA.
Right.
Right. So in some states, that's no big deal. In Virginia, it's a big deal because Virginia housing only has a handful of debt products that they're willing to use, whereas groups like Tom and some others in the state will allow different structures that are more financially feasible to do deals that you just can't do with Virginia housing, period. Right. So part of it could be reallocating, which I think is going to be probably a much more difficult fight
or climb.
But the other piece is just, you know, for government center, any of these, you know, the way it works, if you have a deal that needs, if it's a $40 million total, it's $41 million in total cost, you need $20.5 million in tax exempt bonds, plus or minus. So it makes the deals have to get smaller and then drives up the unit costs of the deal. Whereas if we could do larger deals with Tom and the team, we could then spread the fixed cost across the project, bring the total cost of development down, save resources to them.
Put money into service.
Well, the politics of it will be complex, but every good bill starts with a good idea.
So this is something we've been.
Yeah, not to put too fine a point on it, but that $20 million cap was established years ago and has not been addressed. And It's just not reflective of the reality of the projects that we have to do, particularly up here.
And that's a statewide cap. It's not a Fairfax cap.
It's a statewide cap for all of the
any
for all of
project,
the
20
local
million.
housing authorities,
Individually.
individually, the individual deals.
Right.
Right, but just as an example, we have just got, we got board approval to apply for $99 million in bond volume cap through, with VHDA for the Dominion Square West project. And so, that is a much more realistic, view of what what the needs are for these large projects.
I would just note, Dr. Poggi, as your committee, we have an AHAC executive committee meeting in, we're going to get there, but just from a timing in terms of hearing about the July 1st, when the departments have submitted, and hopefully will share with us, we can be part of that. And then August 1st, we have a meeting in May on May 12th, and then we have a meeting, we have a full meeting June 23rd. And then our last meeting before an August 1st deadline is an executive meeting on July 14th. So just that good timing, which we purposely set to be able to be more proactive in responding.
I think Linda and her vast team can work on drafting language on this that we can begin, socializing with AHAC to make sure that we're all together.
As well as
So
others.
our committee would love to coordinate with Linda on that drafting exercise, but work within the envelopes of the 3 XCOM meetings, so we can give updates if needs be, or we can actually bring a product to the table.
We can get you wrapped around the axle on drafting a bill. I mean, you can do it, and the county attorney's office sometimes hands me bills that are pre-drafted, but I can also just have the folks in Richmond. I can tell them, here's what we want to accomplish. And Department of Legislative Services has a team of lawyers that all they do all day long is draft bills.
I think the answer is make 20 million a bigger number, whatever the number is, and you're kind of done. I assume there's more to it.
Well, first thing I'll do
That's
is
the
look
real
at how
goal.
long that's been around.
It's like
And try to dig out sort of why a cap was even put on. I'm assuming that's some sort of concern about authorities getting out over their skis. But we're a little more sophisticated these days than we might have been when this bill was first done.
I would hazard a guess to say that, it also is to some level reflective of VHDA's interests too.
That's the politics I was talking about.
Absolutely, definitely.
But I think it's this updating and modernization of our, but, as an example, and we run in when kids get into trouble. The last time I looked, the $200 was still the level for a felony charge when somebody graffiti's or,
We have raised
gets
that,
into
but you're right.
trouble. And it's,
And that's a big effort, of course,
Right.
remember,
So just-
to get it, because, $200, well, never mind, you all know that you could pick up something this big and it's $1,000. But back when that was set in the 60s, it was like hearing televisions
The
outside.
point is good. Our code is littered with things. I mean, state's 400 years old. We got stuff that's been out there for years. So yes, modernization comes slowly to Virginia sometimes, but
Does Fairfax work with other, redevelopment housing authorities across the state who obviously share this desire? Like, is there that level of work being done?
We do, as a matter of fact, I have a meeting this afternoon with my counterparts from Arlington and Alexandria. And can certainly discuss this with them. They've got a little bit of a different interest than we do because they don't use their housing authority the way we do.
Right, I see.
So
Arlington doesn't have one.
Arlington doesn't have one. Alexandria's it's a different deal.
Yeah. Are there
But
other in the state that use it, or is it just a Fairfax?
Richmond is pretty active.
But not
Norfolk,
nearly as sophisticated.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Norfolk, maybe a little bit, but but it's not, this is mainly something that impacts
us with the size of deals we have.
Size.
And we could burn this whole meeting talking about the politics of this, but that's actually will be one of the challenges. A bill that comes down and seen as let's do Fairfax a favor. It's not always well received
Right.
in other places.
The whole state can advantage by what we do.
Rich Fairfax that has all the money in the world. Are you asking?
Right. And you've had power.
So the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference is another place where if we can get a speaker or a topic inserted as a way to introduce it and show some broad support of how that might affect it is also another way. You know, it's not just writing it and getting somebody to sponsor it and then, you know, expect you to go plow it with everybody else. It's about doing it deeper because it's the right thing to do. I think those are things, I don't know, Tom,
Great idea.
your folks have had some influence before and sat on some boards or some panels. Those are things too that I think we can begin to think about that influence that makes a difference for the right reasons.
And Nick's friend might be.
Yeah. I would say that I don't think I would go to the Virginia Housing Governors Conference and sit up there and
No, I think.
Right.
be proponent against something against the group that provides
Yeah.
tax credits to a
Yeah.
project. So I think I would prefer to go to a meeting or something like that where it's not in front of.
I think it's a Virginia housing issue that funds the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference and sets the
That
agenda.
would be my concern.
Yeah. I don't know.
And whether it's going to be at the tax credit conference by Virginia Housing Alliance, be interesting if they are socializing these things early because they're June or July, whenever that happens.
Everyone's talking about it, but no
Yeah.
one is.
Doing.
Virginia Housing has a real pull on it, right? I mean, 70% of the bonds or something like that. I mean, it's
That's another issue.
just how it works.
Well, take a page from Joe's committee, you know, talking points surrounding something like this is really part and parcel of what the work should be from the legislative committee. If we center into this one as being a foray for the first time into expanding policy to really be helpful. And it's important for us to imagine the others to who aren't in this room, to who will be influential, who we will need to explain why and how this is to great advantage for the whole of the Commonwealth, but particularly for Fairfax County.
Thanks, Jerry, and again, for your leadership in this committee and moving us forward. We'll be working with you to schedule whether we, and joint, I think we'll plan on joint meetings. And I think next up is Mary Payton, and who has really, who has led and has had a lot of great support on their housing plan. And I had meant to include it, sent out a memo last night, late, that Mary had written up just with recommendations, but I'll turn it over to you to summarize.
Thanks. So Terry asked me just to give a report at this point on what your housing committee's been doing. And we do plan to make some recommendations soon, but we're not at that point yet, but I can tell you what we've been thinking and what we've been doing. So I'm sure y'all read that memo. It's pretty long on my cell phone. It's only 2 pages. And then a couple of annexes. Basically, it says that we've moved the 2 documents that relate to fair housing. One is the COG report, and 2 is the a proposed rule from HUD on affirmatively furthering fair housing that would change the process a little bit from what's been done in the past. And strangely, these 2 things kind of are out at the same time. They should have been sequenced differently, but they weren't. So, but we do think that the COG report can easily be dovetailed into the whatever comes out as the rule of the affirmatively furthering fair housing. It was, the COG people tell us it was developed based on a tougher rule of 2015, an Obama rule. The research was based on a tougher rule than the new rule proposed. So it'll, you know, what we're doing is still in line with the new rule as far as they're concerned. And they're still encouraging governments to get together, join together, and make common goals for their housing, because the housing market isn't always split up into jurisdictions. People don't really care whether they live in Alexandria or Fairfax. They care the neighborhood, the house, the community, they look at that. So so I think we're good going along with the COG goals, if those, that's wrong. But under these broad COG goals, there's also a set of strategies that were developed by the COG team. That under the strategies, there needs to be kind of a set of actions that are developed. And those vary from one to another jurisdiction. Those are not the same for all the 8 jurisdictions that participated in that. And that's the thing that Fairfax County has to do. We don't need more goals. We need the action items, the things that are individual to Fairfax County. So that still needs to be developed for us. And I doubt that will be done before the COG report comes back to us after the review. And it doesn't really have to be done at that point. It's something that can be worked through. But it will have to be done by the time we submit what's going to be called an equity plan to HUD, which is our new guiding plan for how we're going to affirmatively further fair housing. And then this new plan will replace the 2017 report on impediments to fair housing, which we've been working on for a number of years. We've been making reports back to HUD every year on how we're coming along on that report. That report was done by a consulting firm. It was approved by the board, and then we've been reporting on it every year. So this new set of goals, set of actions will replace that, and then we'll report on that every year. That's the way I understand it reading from these documents. So what we noticed in looking at the goals of COG is that they are not strictly confined to the legal aspects of fair housing, as maybe they would have been long ago in terms of reporting discrimination, nor are they even limited to housing, which they have been also overlapping. From the 2017 report, there were issues about affordable housing. We need more affordable housing, and those are reported on every year. But now they're also including planning development goals and transportation goals. One transportation goal, there's about 3 that involve planning and zoning. Anyway, there's an attachment with a list of all the goals and all the strategies attached to the memo I sent out today. Gets rid of all the extra verbiage in this very long report. It just boils it down to the list of goals and strategies that were approved. And that's what the board would have to approve, as I understand it. And then the actions have to be developed that go under these strategies. And the AFFA says you don't have to develop actions under each goal or each strategy every time. You can do some things and get them done, and then do other things and get them done. They're kind of more emphasis on doing things and accomplishing things than there are on having lots and lots of actions that you propose and then, not really having done much on anything every year. They want you to actually look into things and do things. There's also an attachment to the memo that kind of goes down the difference between the issue, the research, the goal, the strategy, and the action. And the actions are supposed to have measurable outcomes. So you're supposed to be able to report out progress every year because you have a measurable outcome type of action. So it's you either did it or you didn't do it, or you did part of it, you're going to do the rest of it. So it's easier to track and report on. But if we're going to do that, I think we need some kind of a guidance during the year for how it gets done. If it's going to involve 4 different departments, somebody has to kind of link this stuff together, not just in the reporting at the end of the year. I mean, that can I don't know. I think that's a joint effort between Tom's department and ORAP, they each report on the things that they did. But what we need is somebody to make sure that things are getting done in all the different departments. And it doesn't have to be a top-down thing. We're not saying how it should be done, but we've talked to Carla Bruce, and she's thinking about how there could be some ways, maybe through equity plans or different mechanisms, that these 4 departments could coordinate the different actions in these 4 departments. And again, we don't have a prescription for that, but we're just saying that's something that needs to be done. Somebody needs to drive the bus here on the Fair Housing Act. And since she's equity and fair housing is equity, you know, that kind of makes sense. And then the third issue we've been talking about is what do we want the Board of Supervisors to do when they get the equity plan comes back? You know, what are we going to recommend to them that they do? And the board can, I know you can advise me on this. They can accept a report, they can approve a report, they can direct somebody to implement the report. You know, there's different things that they can do. So we want to think about what is it we want them to do. And I mean, I would love, you know, the highest level of action would be, you know, okay, here, this is a good plan here. Now you people, whoever they are, whoever we work out in the administrative structure, implement this. And the first thing to implement will probably be developing the actions. Actions, last time they were developed by a consultant, and then the board discussed them. But we don't have a consultant, and we already paid COG a lot of money as we bought into this process to develop the goals and strategies. So it may be that we develop these actions on our own. And I think what we're recommending is that there be some kind of a transparency around that they be developed with some kind of input from this group, you know, from whatever, and it doesn't have to be full-blown public hearings, but it needs to be some kind of public input and review of the actions in the first place, which also would kind of get some buy-in on doing these kind of actions, I think. So that's kind of where we are now with that.
I just want to acknowledge Mary has done a great job, I think, having Ken Saunders, OREP, and their department participate as the current lead, and certainly having the input. And I know that I believe, Tom, currently that will be the place. I think, Mary, what we talked about is for AHAC's ability and the timing, you know, to be able to, you know, comment on the goals that are coming forward as they go to the Board of Supervisors, and then perhaps request an annual report on, you know, as those actions and strategies are developed, an annual, you know, report on how things are moving. And certainly if there are things that have to be fed into budget because of capacity or goals, or things that have to be fed into the state legislative agenda, that somehow we sync the information that's coming out of this process, sync it to our process so we can feed it into our timeline. Am I stating that's what we talked about is trying to get?
Reporting is currently done and would continue to be done under the new HUD rules, right? The consolidated plan, which comes out when, Tom?
It's in spring.
Spring.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be it. We'd take chapter 6, which is labeled other, and we would read that. Right. Yeah, that's where the fair housing thing is reported. I also wanted to say that the OREP did a really excellent webinar yesterday, fair housing. They had some really good speakers they brought in, and they hit on some of the newest stuff in fair housing, and that's mortgage lending and appraisal discrimination and criminal background checks on tenants and mortgage holders. And they really brought in some good experts, and we'll send around the video as soon as I get a link to it. And I recommend everybody take a look at that. Also, OREP did the public meetings, and they sent us a list of what people's comments were. And it's interesting.
Very well done.
Do we have the slides from it?
Yes, it's in the packet, and Tina had included all of that.
Did you include the list of comments at the end?
In Spanish, which was very nice to be able to share with the
Yeah.
communities.
And those went into, I understand those went into the COG group as comments from Fairfax County, so they got.
Very thorough.
I've asked, but I haven't received yet how many comments I got from Fairfax on the Fairfax plan and where it went. Did it go to you, Tom? Thomas? I don't know who they sent.
No, they go direct, they go to,
Our rep said they didn't have them. Well, Arksdale said he didn't have them.
Okay.
Hey, Mary, has Congressman Connolly gotten involved, or he have somebody on his staff that's well versed in this whole thing, this whole issue?
No, I haven't seen any representative.
No, just with the redistricting, right, he really is responsible for Fairfax now. It's not this very small split, but really it's about him. And in terms of HUD and this administration, understanding the issues, if there's going to be an opportunity for progress or some interest, right now is the time, especially with, Connolly's, senior leadership, might be a time to engage or make sure they're conversant in this. And then if we always need it, we've got enough relationships with HUD, but having the congressman front and center converse the issues also be very helpful.
Okay.
Because I think that's when I look back at the issues, when I've been to the briefings, I didn't attend in person. I was on the other ones. I went to the thing with Carla. They're all right. They're right here from the heart. But the problem is it doesn't get to that 25%. I've been with some clients before, and they're like 50% of the time when you come up with solutions, they don't really make a difference. 25% hurts your solution. Only 25%, but what are those 25%? And I think some of the things you have are things we need to engage through the budget and the legislative committee to make a real impact. We just got to figure out what those are. And this isn't Mary on her own trying to come out and pull this out of COG, because again, nice things that elected officials can come back and show that we've done a nice report. It's really big, voluminous with that COG report. But when you go through, so how do we make a difference? And I think those are the things with the committees we have. Now we can really define it and say, no, this is it. Here's the impact. And then the other stuff is nice, but that's going to make a difference.
Well, that's exactly why I think we need to really put some effort and review into even coming up with the actions, because you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to go from the data, here's all the data we studied. Here are the problems we found because we looked at this data. So here's a goal that would eliminate that problem, would make it better. And here are some strategies for accomplishing that goal. And then here's some specific actions with measurable outcomes. And that's the thing that would make a difference. So you have to have good actions developed in order to make a difference. It can't be just vague statements and you say, oh, we did this. And, and then it comes time to the report and everybody says, well, let's see, what did we do that would have accomplished, would have furthered that? And you come up with something and you put it in there. It's got to be real specific things that we're actually working on that we know are going to make a difference. And that's the thing that needs to be worked out in the actions, and then done, and then pushed, and then happening. And how that happens is something that we need to present to the board. We need to give them, I think, some ideas about how to do that, or, and they need to direct some people to do it.
And I think it would be good, maybe helpful. I know we haven't met. We were waiting on the listening sessions and the COG, but circling back with Ken, get a sense of the county's timeline in developing those. And again, an AHAC review if there's other input from outside groups besides AHAC, so that we're consistent when it goes to the board. But I'd like to know what the timeline is. I wasn't clear for the county in terms of when things have to be on their end, that developing the actions versus just the goals.
Yeah.
And then we can,
But it says in the AFFA's report, and I couldn't find the exact place or in there, but it's like within 12 months after these rules are issued, but we don't know when the rules are going to be issued. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
If I may. A couple things that I'd like to sort of note here is that Yeah, this is one issue where HCD is not in the lead in terms of, how we do our fair housing planning and enforcement and all of our testing. So I really appreciate the, sort of the mentioning of OREP as being kind of the vessel for this. And I think as our work moves forward with respect to fair housing, I think one thing I'm going to advocate for is that OREP actually staff this work. Because HCD, I mean, we can try to help, but this is really OREP's bread and butter in terms of their mission, their work. In terms of like actually administering it, it's of course central to our work too.
Yeah.
So I did also just want to note that we have been very cognizant of the concern about the number of goals that were put in for Fairfax County relative to the other jurisdictions, and we've made, based on the feedback at the listening sessions and some of the conversations we've had, we've made some suggestions as to how to expand those. And I think that hopefully that's going to be reflected in the new version of the report that comes out. So
Recommended them to COG?
To COG, yeah. And so through.
But you also had.
We are preparing to recommend them.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have to do, the goals are focused on co-location, the work we're doing on the comprehensive plan for preservation, awareness promotion relative to homeownership and affordable rental opportunities in the private market, awareness relative to fair housing rights, testing, which I think was something that we had heard, that we've discussed a lot, that we've heard a lot about. As well as accessibility issues for people who are linguistically isolated or people with disabilities in terms of being able to access fair housing services via video and other accommodations that we can make for that to be easier for those populations. So we've definitely heard it as well, and are trying to sort of move that forward.
One thing I heard yesterday in the panel was the notion of improving the chances of mortgage lending for minorities and Blacks especially, have a much lower rate of home ownership, and Hispanics as well. And a lot of that is due to not being able to get mortgages. And there is a program that they presented in great detail that would allow that, but it would have to be established by lenders in credit unions or banks, whatever. And it's kind of new. It's old. It's an old thing, but nobody's ever done it.
Special purpose credit programs.
Yeah.
PCPs. And it's something that's been initiated, I think, by Bank of America. It's the only real example that they said is starting to concretize how you could direct lending without prejudice towards people in distinct classes that have historically been underserved.
You can make special loan provisions for people in a protected class.
Right.
And it's not discriminatory if you do that. And it's not in any of the departments, any of the 4 departments we've dealt with so far, but there may be even a wider scope of people we need to deal with.
And so let's get a little more information on that. And certainly, there are many existing programs, and, Virginia Housing supports the statewide network of HUD certified housing counselors that in the homeownership, the requirements that we prepare people and
This
just
is a whole different level.
it sounds great. I'd just like to we can get some more information on it.
I think Virginia Housing looks at
gonna
that
be-
too, and it's of course like everything more complicated than what it initially does.
We want to avoid the travesty of what happened in the past. I can't tell you how much time we spent, all the people that were taken advantage of. And I know that we have learned from those mistakes before the foreclosure crisis and in our banking. I'm sure we've learned from that, and we're not doing that anymore. But That's a real issue. So people were taken advantage of. So
Just for my own
thousands.
clarification, so the goals, because Fairfax was a little light on the goals compared to the other jurisdictions. So HCD sent them to COG, but they will have to be written or put in by OREP.
So OREP is in the lead on this, so we've consulted with them.
Okay,
And my understanding is that they will go to COG via OREP.
okay, by OREP. So this may be a question that isn't relevant, but it always burns in me. Where does enforcement sit? Because when I look at,
It's an OREP.
yeah, and then you look at when I've looked at some of the metrics, if you will, it doesn't seem like it's really happening in an efficient way. So is there can one of the goals be to address that?
We could recommend
And
that.
when is it capacity, with position? I don't know. Are those ever the issues versus
It's a little muddy there, and I'm trying to
the
be
same organization?
without being a PIA, but being a little nudgy on this because, and when you talk to some people who've had issues, there's frustration that they've been able to demonstrate or they feel very clearly that there's been, I'll use the word discrimination, but they haven't been well served and they're in a protected class. And it's just very difficult to move to getting something done or to getting them fair treatment. So I'm not sure how we do that, but I think we gotta define, it's this an OREP, but how can we enable, empower, encourage OREP to really move into that lane? Because it is part of if you read their mission statement, it's part of the mission statement, but I don't, to the best of my knowledge, it's not really happening in a robust fashion.
I would suggest that we would ask Ken to come talk with you about it.
Ken?
Yeah, Ken Saunders.
I know Ken. We've asked before, but that's great. I mean, I think that that's something we should hang on to and really make it consistently the questions that we ask.
What's preventing? Thank you. Mary, thank you. Anything? So I think we'll circle back on timing, your next meeting, pulling this, getting data and ensuring again that as these things, when we get the report back and see the expanded list, I know that Mary has asked OREP to share that, what has gone to COG to share that, or when it's complete to come to us so we can see it. And we'll go from there.
Shout out to Mary. She was very
Really shout out.
diligent.
Yes, she was.
Very diligent on that.
Oh my gosh,
Once it was
64 pages
her
worth of-
emails, she was
Gonna hire her to be a-
encouraging. We get this.
Well, with that, I don't know if there are any other updates on issues that have come before the committee in the past. I know we heard about the Supreme Court issue last time. Is there anything on that? Other issues, burning issues?
I haven't heard anything happening in ZMOD other than I know Fairfax is hurrying to repass it.
Yeah, they're just gonna, my understanding is they're gonna repass it.
Yeah.
Middle of May.
Exactly. And then that's either going to fix it or it'll just lock in where the problems are. But I did a lot of squirreling around in Richmond. I haven't picked up any appetite for doing anything quickly to try to fix what remaining problems there might be.
Is there anything needed, or is it really more let them do this?
No, I mean, I've talked to, the folks in Fairfax are working through VACO and VML. And I've said from the beginning, I think this needs to be, apropos of our earlier comment, this has to be, if there's going to be, quote, a fix, whatever that is, it has to be a statewide fix. It can't be just come to Fairfax's rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that's why
And I'm.
VML and VACO are going to be crucial to that.
For the purposes of entitlement and deals, projects that have gone through entitlements, my understanding is that in May, there's going to be a meeting and they're going to essentially reapprove.
Correct.
CMOD
I think that's the plan.
and likely reapprove all of the other actions.
Yeah, I mean,
Possibly if they have to in some sort of consent agenda or something.
Yeah, the problem, Nick, will be, and I'm hoping this never happens, but whether here or Fairfax or somewhere else in the state, one could imagine a lawsuit somewhere. That building next door got built under the wrong zoning ordinance, tear it down.
And there's
Those are the risks that people are worried about. Lenders are worried.
It's affordable housing.
There's a lot of activity on folks who have been traditionally opposed to growth or don't like next door. There have been a lot of postings about why this was a victory to save, our neighborhoods and counties. Some of our friends in Reston have been very vocal. And so I haven't seen it's a tough one to take on and whether to stay low, but there was a question whether or not there should be a response to some of like Mr. Maynard's statement. So, or whether you just lay low and let process work. And that was just really my question is, are things going to better to let zoning handle it, get through the process?
Well, there's some things Fairfax can control and is doing, and ZMOD will be repassed as soon as the process allows.
All right.
The fallout from it, I think, remains to be seen.
Anything else from anyone on the phone? Or if we still have folks, very few.
There aren't that many on
Megan?
Did you have something?
Just really briefly.
I just have a quick question for Barry. When is our next legislative committee meeting? Or we
I'm
don't
gonna
have?
talk to Tom.
Okay, so I have-
Afterwards, and we'll propose dates.
Great, so I haven't missed it because you haven't figured
No, we
it out
haven't.
yet.
We're
Oh,
gonna
good.
do this meeting to
Love that.
This is it.
declare
Yeah,
where we
right.
will go to.
Thank you.
Sarah, I got a couple of quick, it's, one thought was the homelessness with the COC. What happens, strategy, do we need to be involved or not be involved? What's the? Yeah,
We're very much in process on, getting ourselves reorganized here to move that forward. I am going to want to defer to Tom Barnett to come and brief you though.
Yeah, just a matter of not, because you're, out of sight, out of mind, but it's something that certainly impacts us. And I thought the wisdom of the supervisors to include it with AHAC is something that we need to, even if it's a different, and COC exists, we still need to be engaged and see how that comes back.
Still comment. And I think we had recommended that as the new governing authority to oversee the COC is established, that we have a direct appointment from AHAC and again from the folks that have worked on that. Because the one thing that is good about this time is that what was proposed and accepted was the fact that there would be representatives like Eleanor Vincent, people that have experience, as well as, of course, consumers who have experience where before they were not at the table, not able to really suggest a lot of the, what really happens on a day-to-day basis. So I think, Tom, you guys recommended some things that were really important there to strengthen it. Mary.
I was wondering if maybe we could also get a report on the summer program for homeless folks at our meeting. We got a letter from
Piper.
A memo from head of HHS, Chris Leonard, but didn't have any specifics. And when is our next meeting, Gary? Not here.
June 23rd is full.
So we had-
May
It'll be
12th
high.
Good to know if the communication.
Maybe we can ask Tom to in May.
Operational at that point.
Relevant to that, I was just going to say, today, President Biden is signing a brand new executive order on environmental justice that's far more expansive than the 1994 executive order, which had stood through all of the administrations, Republican and Democrats. This time, it really is very much focused on racial justice, not just environmental injustices writ small. So here's the very issue with extreme weather conditions and climate change impact on the canaries in the cave, the people who are homeless, then I think we really have to begin to step up and think about, what's our emergency housing planning process?
And not, excuse me, Jerry, we've all talked about this, but not just those who are homeless. There are people who are living in all kinds of housing, some of it subsidized or whatever by various authorities who don't have adequate cooling. And they often, or can be people who don't have access to other things and they can't leave. And that is a very bad situation to, forget that that's part of our mission.
I don't know if that made it, I didn't see that in Chris Leonard's.
Well, I thought, I don't know, I remember at one point we were talking about people in housing that were getting rental assistance regardless of the source.
There is a program for people, fans, if they request it, but I don't know how well funded it is.
But I was.
We'll ask for an update.
People who are in units that are supposed to have functioning air conditioning.
Right, and they have no.
And it doesn't work.
Exactly.
That was what I was.
And that's a lot in the private market
And
rate
I don't
affordable and non-conforming leases where people don't have the ability to play. They don't have a standard lease and it's
Yes.
you see a lot of abuse there.
And it could also be in property managers who may or may not be contractors, that the conditions are not, you need functioning air conditioning, you need functioning heat, you need running water and all that. And we've heard a bit about that.
We'll definitely get an update from Tom. I know we haven't received, but we'll ask Tom maybe at the next meeting. We'll find out. John?
Snow removal, since we haven't had any snow, I didn't even take my, I mean, cost saving, a lot of times it ends up being down at in Richmond with the VDOT in terms, but are there some savings, not having as bad a winter that we can turn and use for other things or for housing or air conditioning? I don't know how that money works, or it just goes into a rainy day fund.
Either. But if I had to guess, someone for VDOT were sitting here, they'd probably say, yeah, we didn't spend it on snow, but we're gonna have more potholes as a result,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm almost confident they don't refund it back to the general fund. For use for affordable housing.
Great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yeah, always looking.
I might, if that, I do two last quick things. We did share that we're moving to the second Friday of the month for executive committee. We'll see what our schedule, but we have one scheduled for May and one for July. We have one in June because we have our full.
Correct.
Okay, so May and July. I wanted to, because we have the technology to do in the remote participation, I wanted to just see if people are comfortable with a hybrid or at some point, if we need to go all virtual, we'll need time for that for planning. So I'll wait and hear the good of the order if anybody has an opinion on that for the summer, or as long as we can successfully provide an option for people who can't get here. And that's just about the right room and the right technology.
For a beach attire, you should actually cover up and, not have the wind.
I'll work on that. Then, so just as a reminder, next full meeting is June 23rd. We will update. There are some old calendar announcements that we're going to, you need to remove from your calendar. Regina's going to send a note. I want to thank Malia. Thank you so much as always. And I know Megan is on I believe Megan was or is on the phone.
Yes.
Yes, and certainly Linda will thank again. Regina, this is it for us, huh?
Oh, my goodness.
Really?
Oh, boy.
Look at her smile.
I heard that Martin Luther King Jr. speech, free at last.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for everything.
We will miss you.
I know.
28, good for you. Congratulations.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you
So
all.
appreciative, and just, it's been a great year because of your work, and going to circle up with Tom and Megan to to kind of see about, you know, again, keeping it going, but it's because of all of you willing to put in the time. So we appreciate it. And with that, wow.
We are adjourned. Look at that.
Yeah.